Imagine the late 18th century, a pivotal moment when the world stood at a historic crossroads. Europe shimmered with the ideals of the Enlightenment. Reason, science, and the promise of human progress illuminated the continent like a beacon. Thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau stirred the air with bold visions of liberty and equality, their words igniting hope for a better society. Yet beneath this radiant surface lurked a grim shadow stretching across distant lands, colonialism, a force that brought devastation to those far beyond Europe's borders. In South Africa's Cape Colony, the Khoikhoi people, free herders who once roamed the vast grasslands alongside their cattle, saw their traditional way of life torn apart. Their lands were stolen by force, their rich culture trampled, and their dignity crushed under the weight of foreign domination. Welcome back to History Unraveled channel, where history comes to light. Into this broken world, a baby girl named Sara Baartman was born in 1789 in the Kamtabu Valley, now part of South Africa's Eastern Cape. She arrived in a land already fractured, a place that would soon rip her own life to shreds. Sara's story would come to stand as a haunting symbol of colonial exploitation, a stark reflection of the brutality inflicted upon indigenous peoples and the perverse curiosity of a society that dared to call itself civilized. Exhibited as a spectacle, dissected as a specimen, and denied dignity even in death, her tale is a tragedy that pierces the heart. Yet it's also a story of spiritual resilience, of a legacy that fought its way back to its rightful home. This is the tragic life of Sara Baartman, a woman the world came to know as the Hottentot Venus. Sara Baartman, often called Sarchi, was born into the Gonakwa subgroup of the Khoikhoi, a native South African people with a deep history and vibrant culture. They spoke a distinctive language filled with unique click sounds and revered deities like Sui Goab, the god of rain and creation, believed to bestow life and hope upon their land. For the Khoikhoi, cattle were far more than a livelihood. They were emblems of prosperity and honor, weaving families and communities together in a tapestry of shared heritage. But by the time Sara took her first breath, that tapestry was unraveling. The Dutch had arrived in the Cape Colony in 1652, carving out farms and driving the Khoikhoi from their ancestral territories. By the late 18th century, the British assumed control, bringing even more ruthless land seizure policies that tightened the noose around the Khoikhoi's way of life. Anthropologist Chiraj Rasool from the University of Western Cape captures the devastation. The arrival of colonizers didn't just steal land, it demolished the social structure of the Khoikhoi, forcing them into servitude and plunging them into poverty. Smallpox carried by European settlers swept through like a merciless plague, claiming thousands of lives and fracturing families into fragments. Sara's own family couldn't escape this relentless tide of destruction. Her mother died when Sara was just 2 years old, leaving her in the care of her father, a skilled cattle herder who carried the traditions of his people. He might have woven stories of their ancestors for her, tales of a time when the Khoikhoi roamed freely across the grasslands, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of the land. But he couldn't shield her from the harsh reality encroaching upon them. He was killed in a clash with the San, another indigenous group pushed to the brink by the same colonial forces that ravaged the Khoikhoi. Orphaned at a tender age, Sara faced a world where safety and innocence had been stripped away, leaving her vulnerable and alone. As a young woman, Sara married a Khoikhoi drummer, an artisan within the community whose music brought fleeting moments of joy amid her mounting losses. Together they had a child, but the infant died shortly after birth, adding yet another layer of sorrow to her already burdened heart. Her life became an unbroken chain of tragedies, losing her mother, her father, her child, mirroring the fate of countless Khoikhoi as their nation crumbled under colonial pressure. These weren't merely personal griefs. They were the reverberations of a culture and community being systematically torn apart by the hands of invaders. Around 1808, with her life reduced to despair, a free black trader named Peter Caesars approached Sara with a promise of a better existence in Cape Town. He might have sketched a vision of steady work, a chance to break free from the poverty and isolation that defined her rural existence. For Sara, a woman with no family or possessions left to her name, this offer could have felt like a faint glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak world. Yet in a society steeped in injustice, her consent was likely less a choice than a surrender to desperation and the weight of her circumstances. Cape Town in the early 19th century was a thriving port city under British control, a vibrant hub where ships from across the globe docked, unloading goods and new ideas. For indigenous people like Sara, however, it was a cold and alien landscape, far removed from the open plains of her childhood. She began as a nursemaid for Caesars's family, tending to their children while she herself had no kin to lean on. Later, she worked for Hendrik Caesars, Peter's Dutch brother, who gave her the name Saartjie, a diminutive that belittled her, as if her true identity held no worth in this new world. Life in Cape Town was a veiled form of bondage, though not legally enslaved. Sara was far from free, toiling from dawn until dusk in wretched conditions, her autonomy a distant memory. She found a brief respite in a relationship with Hendrik van Jong, a Dutch soldier stationed in the city, but when his regiment departed, she was left abandoned once more, isolated in a place that thrived on the labor of the downtrodden. Historical records from Cape Town paint a somber picture. Khoikhoi women like Sara were routinely exploited, their bodies and strength turned into mere commodities in a colonial economy driven by relentless greed. In 1810, Sara's fate plunged deeper into darkness when William Dunlop, a Scottish surgeon with a sideline in trading rare curiosities, noticed her in Cape Town. He became fixated on her body, particularly her steatopygia, the pronounced accumulation of fat in her buttocks, and other physical traits common among Khoikhoi women. To Europeans of the time, these features were strange and exotic, a lucrative opportunity for public spectacle. Dunlop persuaded her to travel to London, dangling promises of wealth and a return home after 5 years of work. She agreed, insisting that Hendrik Caesars accompany her as a source of comfort, and signed a contract she couldn't read or comprehend, a chilling testament to the exploitation already wrapping its coils around her life. Sara arrived in London in November 1810 and was swiftly thrust into a living nightmare. At the Egyptian Hall in Piccadilly Circus, a renowned venue for oddity shows serving England's middle and upper classes, she was branded the Hottentot Venus. The name was steeped in mockery, Hottentot, a derogatory European term for the Khoikhoi, paired with Venus, the Roman goddess of beauty, twisted into bitter irony. Confined in a cage barely 5 feet tall, she was forced to dance, sing, and display her body for crowds eager to gawk at the unusual. Some paid extra for private sessions, treating her like an object to prod and examine. Clothed in tight-fitting garments that accentuated her form, she was advertised in flyers as a savage marvel from the wilds. Historian Sadia Qureshi, in her book Peoples on Parade, 2011, observes, Sara wasn't seen as a human being, but as a specimen to scrutinize and deride, a reflection of the warped curiosity gripping European society at the time. In 1811, British abolitionists, spearheaded by the African Association and Zachary Macaulay, a pivotal figure in the fight to end the slave trade, brought her plight to court. They argued that she was coerced and treated as a slave. During the trial, Sara claimed she had come to London willingly and suffered no abuse. But with Dunlop hovering nearby and no translator to assist her, her testimony felt suspect. The case fell apart, and her suffering continued unabated. She was carted across England and Ireland, a reluctant figure of fame, drowning in a sea of misery. By 1814, Dunlop had passed away, and Henry Taylor took her to Paris. There she briefly brushed against high society, appearing at fashionable spots like the Café de Paris, a momentary taste of elegance amid her torment. This glimmer was short-lived. Taylor sold her to S. Real, an animal trainer who paraded her alongside creatures like baby rhinos, nearly naked. Save for a small apron she stubbornly refused to remove, she stood in a cage, sometimes wearing a collar, a human being stripped of all humanity. French scientists, led by Georges Cuvier, a renowned anatomist at the Natural History Museum, seized the opportunity to study her while she was still alive, deeming her a bridge between humans and animals to support their flawed racial theories. Cuvier wrote in his notes, "She resembles an ape more than a human," transforming her into a tool for pseudoscience. Yet amid this relentless dehumanization, Sara stood firm, refusing to fully expose herself, a quiet act of defiance against a world determined to break her spirit. Sara died on December 29, 1815, in Paris at the tender age of 26. Was it smallpox that claimed her? Syphilis? Or perhaps alcohol poisoning from drinks forced upon her during performances? Scholars still debate the cause, but her death was the grim result of years spent in harsh, exploitative conditions. Death should have brought her peace. It didn't. Georges Cuvier swiftly claimed her body, conducting a detailed dissection not to determine the reason for her passing, but to advance his racist ideology. During the dissection, Cuvier preserved her brain, genitals, and bones in jars of formalin and molded her form into a plaster cast, a grotesque keepsake of his theories. For over a century, from 1815 to 1974, her remains were displayed in Paris's Natural History Museum, later transferred to the Musée de l'Homme. Millions came to stare, not at a woman who had lived, loved, and suffered, but at a curiosity devoid of humanity. Historian Pamela Scully, in her book Sara Baartman and the Hottentot Venus, 2008, writes, Sara's body became a screen for European anxieties and delusions, a prop used to rationalize the oppression and violence inflicted on indigenous peoples. Her exploitation didn't end with her final breath. It lingered across generations, carving a deep wound into the fabric of human history. Sara Baartman's story slipped into obscurity throughout the 19th century and much of the 20th. But when South Africa emerged from the chains of apartheid in 1994, the nation began to confront its anguished past, and her name emerged once more as a powerful symbol of colonial wrongs. In 1994, Nelson Mandela, the country's first post-apartheid president, demanded that France return her remains, viewing it as an act to restore her humanity and dignity. Activists, including poet Diana Ferris with her poignant poem I've Come to Take You Home, 1998, fueled a global outcry. Ferris's words, a heartfelt apology, resonate deeply. I've come to wipe away the tears you shed to bring you back where you belong. After years of negotiations and legal struggles, France finally yielded. On May 6, 2002, Sara's remains reached South Africa. On August 9, 2002, South Africa's Women's Day, she was laid to rest on a hill near the Gamtoos River, mere miles from where she was born. Hundreds attended a solemn ceremony, lighting fires, singing traditional Khoikhoi songs of tribute, and scattering earth to bless her spirit's eternal peace. This wasn't just a belated apology from humanity. It was a vital step toward healing the scars colonialism had inflicted upon South Africa. Sara's legacy lives on through art and social movements. Susan Laurie Parks's play Venus, 1996, reimagines her life to denounce colonial exploitation and gender bias, while Abdelatif Kechiche's film Black Venus, 2010, offers a raw glimpse into her suffering. Her story has found its way into classrooms, igniting discussions about human rights and the enduring scars of history. Historian Yvette Abrahams reflects, Sara wasn't merely a victim. She was a woman who lived, loved, and resisted in her own quiet way. Abrahams, 2010. Though we lack Sara's own voice, we can envision the emotions that pulsed through her short, sorrow-filled life. Torn from her homeland, she might have held tight to memories of nights by the fire in Kamtabu Valley, the steady thrum of Khoikhoi drums filling the air, the sight of cattle grazing beneath an endless sky. Those cherished images may have been her sole solace during her lonely days in Cape Town, where she toiled as a servant in a world that didn't belong to her. In Europe, standing on a stage beneath the harsh glare of curious eyes, the pain must have sliced deep, each look a sharp wound to her pride. She might have recalled the child she never nurtured, the parents she lost forever, and the homeland she'd been stripped from. Yet within this furnace of torment, Sara discovered an inner strength, her steadfast refusal to remove that small apron, her resistance to being fully exposed before the crowds, was a silent act of defiance, a way to protect her dignity from those who sought to erase it entirely. Historian Pamela Scully observes, this small gesture was Sara's voice, a declaration of her right to control her own body amid unrelenting oppression. Sara Baartman's life is more than a tragic tale. It's a profound historical lesson about the cruelty of colonialism, the misuse of science, and the struggle for human rights. It poses a pressing question for us today. How can we prevent such injustices in our modern world? Teachers and scholars encourage students to reflect on the legacy of colonial exploitation and the ways pseudoscience was wielded to dehumanize entire peoples. Sara's story teaches us to value diversity and to fight tirelessly for a society where dignity is a universal right, not a rare privilege. Her journey connects the past to the present, igniting debates about bodily autonomy and racial prejudice. In 2014, Kim Kardashian's Paper magazine cover, featuring her balancing a champagne glass on her backside, drew parallels to Sara, sparking intense controversy about the echoes of historical exploitation. Some condemned it as a thoughtless nod to a painful past, while others saw it as a way to reframe her story in a modern context. Regardless of where one stands, the debate proves Sara's legacy remains a raw, urgent force, compelling us to examine how the shadows of history linger in our time. History is more than a collection of dates and events. It's a chorus of voices like Sara's. In the early 1800s, European onlookers viewed her as a marvel or a freak, with newspapers in London and Paris calling her a wonder of nature or a creature from the wilds. Yet abolitionists raised their voices in protest, labeling her exhibition a shame to humanity. In the 20th century, as her remains sat in France, some scientists, like Philippe Ménessier at the Musée de l'Homme, argued for keeping her, claiming, "We cannot predict what science might uncover in the future." South Africans, however, saw it as colonial hubris, a refusal to acknowledge her inherent humanity. Her 2002 return home won widespread praise, a victory for historical justice, wrote the BBC and The Guardian. Yet a few Western scholars grumbled that her burial lost scientific potential, a view that inflamed outrage in South Africa. These conflicting perspectives reveal that Sara's story isn't a closed chapter. It's an ongoing conversation about ethics, science, and reverence. Educators draw on her life to explore deeper questions. How could the lofty ideals of the Enlightenment coexist with such brutality. What does her exploitation teach us about power and bias? Students grapple with these issues, absorbing not just the facts of history, but the responsibility to ensure no one's dignity is crushed as hers was. Sara's path, from a Khoikhoi girl to a global symbol, urges us to look beyond the surface, to see the human soul behind the spectacle. Sara Baartman's story still resonates powerfully in today's world, particularly in discussions about the exploitation of women's bodies and racial bias. Take, for example, the 2014 controversy over Kim Kardashian's Paper magazine cover, where she balanced a champagne glass on her backside, an image that drew stark comparisons to Sara's own exploitation. Critics argued it was a careless echo of a painful history, while others viewed it as a way to reframe her story in a modern context. Whatever one believes, the uproar underscores that Sara's legacy remains a sensitive, living issue, demanding thoughtful reflection from us all. Sara Baartman's life was a tragedy marked by exploitation and loss. Yet it also stands as a testament to an unbreakable spirit and a legacy that endures through time. Born a humble Khoikhoi girl in the windswept Kamtabu Valley, she was transformed into the Hottentot Venus, a figure subjected to morbid curiosity and distorted science. But through her repatriation and the belated recognition of her humanity, she rose above the suffering inflicted upon her, becoming an enduring symbol of resilience and compassion. Standing before her grave in Hanki today, we honor not only Sara, but also the millions of unnamed souls who bore the silent agonies of colonial oppression, their stories buried beneath the weight of history. Her journey, from the vibrant heartland of the Khoikhoi to the indelible mark she has left on humanity's conscience, serves as a poignant reminder that even amidst unimaginable hardship, the human spirit can endure, resist, and inspire, calling us to transform pain into purpose and to build a future where no one suffers the indignities she faced.